All right, let's get started, everyone. I think folks will continue to trickle in. I want to thank you all for being here and welcome to an open house on the Co-op Navigator Fellowship 2.0. This is our second cohort that we're launching. So we're glad you're all here to celebrate with us and to possibly join the movement through this fellowship. My name is Johan Matthews. I'm a member of the learning team here at the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. And today we're going to be discussing the Fellowship 2.0. We have a few of our fellowship fellows from our first cohort here to join us to share a bit of their experience, and we'll have the resources you need to apply to be a fellow and to be a part of this movement. So I'm already sharing my screen. We're going to record this session. If you have any issues with that, feel free to stay off camera. It's going to be mostly us sharing from our end, and at the end you'll have your chance to share some questions or to ask some questions. So with that said, let's dive in. A little bit about the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, our host of this program. We're a nonprofit community development financial institution, been around for about 50 years. And we're here to fund cooperatives, providing co-op-friendly financial products and services. And we also support cooperatives through co-op business coaching. That's a lot of what the learning team does. You'll hear more in a second. And for investors, we serve as an investment opportunity that promotes socially conscious enterprise. So if you're ready, feel free to invest or come look to us for support and funding. As I mentioned, I'm a member of the learning team. My role is the ecosystem strategy manager. I'm joined on this call by Carolyn, our program director, and Maggie and Carla, our program administrator and our co-op coach. And we work as a team to support co-ops as a technical assistance arm of CFNE. Since 2019, starting with Carolyn, we've been providing no-cost co-op business support to hundreds of co-ops and co-op curious entrepreneurs. So no matter your stage of growth, our team of coaches can work with you to understand your goals, help you clarify your next steps, and identify any options for additional support. Whenever you're ready, go to our website, coopfund.coop/coaching, and get started. Today, we're going to be meeting for about 60 minutes, now about 50. First, we're going to talk about why the Co-op Navigator Fellowship. We're going to talk about the 2.0 version of the Co-op Navigator Fellowship, what's changed, what this particular offering is about for those of you interested in applying, and then we'll have a Q&A. So that is what we're here to do today. Everyone good with that? Yeah, thumbs up. There we go, Trey. Yeah, appreciate the feedback. You guys feel free to drop your introductions in the chat. Maybe there's someone you would like to meet or who would like to meet you as well. So feel free to do that, so where you're coming from. Maybe you guys can have some engagement in the chat. All right. So why the Co-op Navigator Fellowship? Why do we come up with this? We're a funding institution. Why are we getting involved? Well, at CFNE, we recognize that our nation's history of racially motivated economic exclusion has left emerging communities across the Northeast with limited access to culturally relevant co-op development, whether that's in an urban area or in a reservation, an Indigenous area, Lots of spaces don't have access to the type of support that really understands their needs, their situations. And so oftentimes they might go to a business advisor or someone who might understand business development or nonprofit development, and they get a prepackaged concept of what they ought to be doing, right? Canned goods, right? It could help them eat, do something, but it doesn't speak to their essential identity and aspirations. And so it's a gap, right? How do we respond to that gap so that we create the conditions for cooperative success in these emerging communities, right? In these emerging co-op ecosystems? How do we do so? Recognizing that gap is there. So we spoke to partners, friends, folks who are grounded in these communities, in the Black community, in Latinx and immigrant communities, in Indigenous communities, who are striving to develop community-owned and governed enterprises, right? What do they think? And through that consultation, we decided to invest 800,000 to pilot a 3-year fellowship program. So that was 1.0. That was a pilot, us trying to be as intentional as possible to create the impact that we're looking to create, right? How do we change the face of the co-op movement so everyone knows there's room for them in this movement, that there's a way for them to do what they intend to do to change their lives and community through this movement. So that's what we did. And we ended up partnering with 5 locally led, community centered economic development organizations and community development organizations across the Northeast, from Maine to Rhode Island. And we partnered with them to hire, train, and mentor 5 local co-op interested organizer or entrepreneur who are going to serve their community as a co-op navigator, right? So we worked with the fellows, with the host sites, and with the community to create a very clear narrative on why this model makes sense for that community and how they can get involved. And we did this not just to respond to a gap, but because we recognize that the nature of and role of technical assistance is changing. It's not just an expert affiliated with a well-resourced institution coming down from the funding heavens or whatever and doing something for you, doing a business plan for you, giving you a template. No, it's working with you. And the folks in those communities who already have the deepest understanding of the issues and the context, they have creative and viable ideas. So they can work with you. In fact, they can work with each other to create co-opportunities and to support folks who are aspiring cooperators. So that is the logic of this program, recognizing that service gap for culturally relevant co-op development, as well as the changing nature of technical assistance, right? Working with communities and not just for. Of course, there's always going to be some, professional services, consultants, and all of that. But how do we prepare people in communities who have that expertise and that conceptual knowledge and the contextual knowledge to support cooperative development? So that's a lot of what we're trying to do. And these are some of our fellows. And so we gathered these fellows in the fall of 2022, and we started to vision with them, what would a cooperative future look like? At the time, though it's changed quite a bit, thanks to fellows, thanks to all of us, the world today looked like not many of us were a part of it, right? The cooperative world that day, right? We weren't centered, right? Some of us may have been lucky to be in those spaces, but not many of us. There were barriers around resources. We weren't sure where to go for help, or we're reinventing the wheel, right? The image cast about co-ops just seemed inaccessible. So that was the world today for many of us, right? There were not many of us who were centered. And some of us were already in the emerging world. They were getting there, right? They had a legacy that they inherited, or they decided to take initiative, and they were taking up space. They were finding resources. They found a visible path to cooperation, and co-ops and cooperators eventually seemed accessible to them, right? So some of us were in the world today, some of us were in the emerging world, but all of us were trying to get to the next world, the world where we're present, where we're in here, right? Where the government and nonprofit gatekeepers are gone, the power of the people was overwhelming, right? We create our own space, we invite others with power to that space, and we shape our agendas together, right? We wanted to get to that next world, right? We believe in a peaceful revolution, but in the drawing, you can see bits of white chalk on the pavement. So we're ready for that next world. And then finally, the future world where we own it, right? We own the economy, we own the infrastructure in our communities that allows us to develop the enterprises that meet our needs, right, and respond to our unique aspirations and identities, right. So our communities have what they need to create new co-ops. We have clear boundaries against corporate exploitation. Tools and resources are available, and we all have straightforward paths to cooperation. So, with this vision in mind, we embarked on our journey together over the next 3 years. I want to share with you a video from some of our fellows, not all of them, but a few, to speak to this experience a little bit. Let me make sure the sound is working on this, but I'll hit play for now.
Through this fellowship, I really wanted to learn about better ways to develop cooperatives from a Black and brown lens. My experience in the cooperative ecosystem is that wasn't happening. And so I thought this was a very unique opportunity to just bring culture into cooperative development in ways that it just hasn't been my experience.
I was hoping to learn more about co-ops first and foremost. I heard about co-ops, I shopped at local food co-op, but I really didn't know the ins and outs of what it takes to actually start and then operate a co-op. Like really thinking about what does it take to cultivate the soil for more co-ops or more organizations to thrive within an ecosystem was something I was really interested in. I think one of the proudest moments for me as a fellow was organizing a statewide co-op conference in October 2024, brought together 150 people from around the state and around the region. It was just a culmination of a lot of relationships I built through the fellowship and seeing the impact of that conference and how many people left really feeling inspired about their own co-ops or more aware of what's happening in our ecosystem.
I would say the most impactful thing just coming out of the fellowship is the question of what's beyond ownership. Because most people who are interested in co-ops are not necessarily interested first in owning the business. They're actually more, I think, interested in being part of the solidarity economy.
Excellent. So big ups to our fellows. We've got Varun and Steph featured in that, but we've also have David, Desiree, and Swain, who didn't have speaking roles, but they were present. So you'll hear from a few of them next. At the end of that video, we had some of their impacts. You can read about it in the slide deck. We'll send it out. They're from 5 different areas: Hartford, Connecticut, Central Falls, Rhode Island, upstate New York, Oriole, Maine, and the Northeast region coming out of New York City as well. So we've got quite a bit of representation. You can read about it. You'll hear from some of them. Program highlights. Through this fellowship, state-level alliances in Rhode Island and Connecticut were started or grown, right? They secured funding if they existed and new partnerships, or they got started entirely, right? Where there wasn't any activity, folks came together to create state-level alliances. We saw self-organizing networks of Black, Indigenous, and people of color farmers scaling across the Northeast. You can check with Steph for some of that. We've got culturally rooted tools, right? Relevant resources that came out of how people saw themselves, how people saw the world, and not just, we're importing outside ideas. Oral histories, evergreen guides, and all of these are supporting Indigenous communities in Maine right now. Shout out to Desi. Sustaining community work, right? Fellowship projects attracted new funding, created infrastructure that will sustain group far beyond the program. And the whole sites that we partnered with are going to continue to serve as anchors, and the fellows continue to serve as connectors, right? Whether they take on roles, join boards, actually continue to support as consultants, or working as a co-op developer somewhere. So a lot of impressive highlights from the program over these past 3 years. The program structure that we used before was a little different, right? We had a cohort model that remains the same. We're going to have peer support options, whether that's a retreat at the end or at the beginning in Boston. We have peer study circles that we can support. We have shared learning and built-in accountability and mutual support. We provided live and wage support last time because it was over a period of 2 years plus a third year. This time it's over 9 months. You'll hear a bit more later. So it's mostly a stipend for professional development. And then we are always community centered, right? Fellows were embedded in locally led community centered host sites. This time you're working directly with us, and you'll continue to find partners in the community to identify opportunities and to strengthen capacity to support co-opportunities. So that was a bit of what we did before, just highlighting the contrast. If you want to read more about this, you can check out our executive summary. You can scan the QR code. There'll also be a link in this deck at the end. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and we can hear from some of the fellows directly about their experience. All right. So welcome, everyone. Good to see you guys, smiling faces. Spend a lot of time together. Love these guys. So, of course, the first question is, why should anyone be a part of this, right? Well, in your experience, whether it's in the community or with CFNE, makes this something worthwhile? I'll start with you, Steph.
So, hey, everybody. I'm Steph from Brooklyn Packers. I do food work in New York City in Bed-Stuy, and also expanding this food work to Poughkeepsie, New York, is where I actually live. So being closer to farms, the source of food, is really important. And generally what I'm doing is advocating for a farmer-led food system. And so I advocate for that through my work and through other related projects. So, to that, speaking to why, I think it's really important. I said it in the video. It's like, my experience, I've been in the co-op ecosystem, in the solidarity ecosystem for more than 10 years. And as a participant and also as a co-op owner, but also as a paid co-op advocate. And you're kind of like co-op developer in training for all that time. And I just, just seeing like how you have a bunch of like nonprofits that are doing more like top-down work, which rarely includes a lot of people, any people of color leading it. But most of the co-ops that are being developed are co-ops that have people of color in them. So that right there is an issue. So when this opportunity came up, I was like, oh, that's something that that really speaks to me. Like, how do we as people of color lead the co-op movement in which we are a part of? It's similar to like being in a co-op. It's like, how do we as people who do this work own the work that we are doing, instead of somebody else owning it, which is what we typically see in this society. So it was really important for me to like really be in an ecosystem of Black and brown folks doing this work together, learning, even though I'm probably out of all the fellows in this past cohort, the one that has the most co-op experience. I'm still learning, and I'm learning from everyone. I'm learning from the participants, the other fellows, but I'm also learning from the leadership of CFNE. And that was really important for me to have a bunch of different perspectives around co-ops and solidarity economy through this Black and brown lens. And so that really spoke to me. And it was and it continues to be an amazing experience with these folks.
Excellent. Thanks, Steph. Steph's definitely an OG. He looks so young, but he's been in the game and he has a great reputation. And, we tried our best to bring in mentors like Steph, folks who've been in the co-op movement and found their way through, whether it's as a developer or as a cooperator, to share their experience. Folks can kind of follow the path, knowing that they're not the first, they're not the last. I think Steph speaks to that, and would be a great resource for anyone interested in walking that path. Varun, I want to go to you. You're someone who's made, I would say, a transformative impact in your ecosystem down in Connecticut. Before you started, hard to know what's going on in cooperation. Now you can tell. So I want to ask you, what opportunities did you see, did you observe in your ecosystem to make an impact?
Yeah, I think I came into the fellowship really green. I sort of, came out of education and community organizing work and um, was, had spent like a decade trying to figure out how do we survive and resist racial capitalism, but not really thinking much about what is the strategy or what are the tools to build the alternative. So that our communities, but build the next system where our communities can, be free and meet our needs. And so that, in Connecticut, in particular, Connecticut's, one of the most unequal and racially segregated states in the country, right? And there have been sort of cooperation has existed in pockets, and I think something we talked about throughout the fellowship is the spirit of cooperation lives in our communities, right? Even if we don't see co-ops everywhere. We have always, as immigrants, as Black communities, Indigenous communities have practiced cooperation, and so I think that the sort of 3 years I spent with in the fellowship really was about finding, you know, like looking beyond just like there weren't many co-ops in Connecticut, but finding sort of who are the people that are believe in cooperation, that believe in solidarity, are practicing solidarity and practicing cooperation. And I think trying to, building this network, which, eventually became Cooperate Connecticut. And now, we just launched this past year our membership model. We have this summer, I'm working with Mari, who's here. Shout out to Mari and a team of folks to run offers and needs markets to bring folks in a cooperative and solidarity economy movement together to figure out what are ways that we can share material and non-material resources with each other to support our work. So we're very much on sort of laying the foundation for more the sort of more culture and infrastructure to support co-op development here in Connecticut. And so I think that that's really to me where I'm see, the opportunity. I think we, not being in a paid role anymore, like since the fellowship ended, I'm now leading organizing the network on a volunteer basis, and it's just challenging to sustain that as a freelance I work freelance. And so I'm really looking forward to meeting the new fellows and building our team and really growing our capacity to just at the very least, like continue to bring people together in Connecticut to figure out how can we help each other and strategize about what is it going to take to build our ecosystem, and that sort of just like building the table and getting more people to come to the table with us, because I think there's a lot of different solutions. Like I think there's not one solution, and I think I'm excited to see what the fellows come, I think there's depending on the sector, right? Like there's a lot of different interventions that are needed. And I think what's most important to me is that we're doing this together and that we're not kind of trying to um, fight against the system like in a silos, which is often the case in Connecticut, often is the case. And I think generally, I think that's some, one of the effects of living under capitalism is we end up really isolated. And I think even if we're doing cooperative and solidarity economy work, it can be really lonely. So I think that's one of the benefits of the fellowship has just being knowing Desi and Steph and Swain and David and all the other folks that we're even if we don't talk every day, that we're in this together. And I think that it really inspired me to want to bring that culture to Connecticut. And I think that's I think to me the what the specifics look like, I don't know, because I really don't want to say like for each fellow that we'll have to I'm excited for them to bring their unique gifts, but I do think, yeah, having more people to steward the network and to bring more people across sectors together, I think is what excites me, and so that we can start to develop a shared, like a long-term vision and a strategy as a network. Because I think the foundation exists, and now we just got to start building, and it's going to take years. And so this is sort of, yeah, but I think, we I need you, who are new fellows. We need you. So look forward to meeting you and getting to work with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. The spirit of cooperation. It's there, and in an economic system that alienates us, disconnects us along various lines, racial and otherwise, we know that spirit is yearning for connection in all of us. And you definitely created a great foundation. And now, someone who wants to stand and grow and climb that vine, they can. So, big ups to you, Varun. Switch to you, Desiree. You're a super connector. Throughout your whole journey, you're finding people constantly and evolving. Peace, Steph. Say thanks to Steph. Steph has to jump. But you're constantly finding people, finding new opportunities, constantly evolving your practice. So I love that about you. I want to ask you, what type of projects might you be excited to connect with, in this next generation of fellows?
Well, thank you so much. First of all, to the whole education team at CFNE. Just amazing professional connectors. So, I landed myself in the right place. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to looking at the intersection of Black and Indigenous communities in the arts and wellness. Um, and spaces that we own and operate. And how do we make that more accessible? How do we reclaim spaces that need to be revitalized in your community, that once were very lively, or especially played a role to Black and Indigenous communities for gathering spaces? That's where I see a lot of opportunity, places where there's challenges, or it once was a community space, but they've let it go. That's where I see the biggest hope for like revival, and that's where I'm most interested. Now, when I'm in a community or I'm in an environment and I see a challenge, or I see that there's a certain group that I think should be in this space is missing, I look at that as an opportunity. And that's what I'm looking for in the new fellows. I want to know, who's really doing the revival work in their community and working by themselves, and needs support, and needs to be uplifted, who needs to be acknowledged, and have a powerful team around them that can guide them. And so, that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm at a meditation retreat right now that I started coming to this community in 2013, and it was all white. Now I'm on a BIPOC Sangha meditation retreat with like 17 others. The staff has been transformed, and it's like a gift to be here right now and be one of the first people to say yes to being in this space, because we belong here, and to claim that. And sometimes you do have to be the first in a kind of rough situation where you feel like you don't belong. And what I'm looking for from the next cohort is this sense of belonging and deep relationship building. And I think, yes, there's work to be done, and it will get done. But first of all, what comes first is building the relationship. So when you have the sessions with CFNE, being able to show up fully, being ready with the pre-work, because it is going to enhance your experience. And the more research and the more prepared you are for those sessions, the more you can put it to use. And that's something that when I have new experiences, or I'm in a first cohort, that you can kind of like overlook because you're doing so many things, and so that's something else that I would attune to if you become a fellow in this in the next cohort. I'm really looking for that person, that are those who are really ready to like show up and build those deep relationships that are needed.
Yeah, and if I could, Johan, if I could jump in, I think
Mhm.
just to add to that, yeah, I love that, Desi. And I wish I was there with you.
Yes.
Um, I think I would just to me what the fellowship was and what I hope this next round of the fellowship is an initiation into a lifelong community of practice of people stewarding our cooperative ecosystem in the Northeast. So it's this next fellowship is shorter, it's much shorter in length and sort of but I think that and Steph, you referenced this earlier too, like I think that the learning and the connection doesn't stop with the fellowship, and it happens also outside of just the sessions. Like I think it's a way for us to just get to know who else is in this, and to be in sort of to be partners with CFNE. CFNE, I'm really again so grateful for CFNE's work, and we need more. We need to build a deeper bench. We need more people in all parts of this region to be doing this work and to be singing this song, kind of carrying this banner. So I think that that's just a way to think about this, is a sort of initiation, activation of a broader network. Yeah.
Love that. You guys made me want to apply. I think. Yeah, no, you guys said it. A lot of times we're in our own neighborhood, town, city, feeling alone, trying to figure things out. And when you connect with others, connect with other communities, all of a sudden there's a groundswell and a space created for us. And I've seen it over the last 3 years in the broader ecosystem and particularly in our group. So thank you guys for being willing to join this, to take initiative, to be initiated. So that's it for now. We're going to go back to sharing a little bit about 2.0, but snaps to our fellows. Love you guys. You're gonna see more of them if you are selected as a fellow. All right, so I'm gonna share my screen and briefly try to provide an overview of 2.0. As I mentioned, some of the differences before. You might have heard some of this, but just ask any questions if anything is unclear. So, briefly, and Carolyn, join in anytime. We're going to do this fellowship for 9 months, right? So it's running from the fall when folks are selected into next summer, into June, right? So that's what we're hoping, 9 months. Locations are going to be in New York State, primarily upstate, but throughout the state, and New England, right? So the 5 or 6 states in New England, especially Rhode Island and Connecticut. So we're hoping to target New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut. Really, all the states are open, and rural areas throughout each of the states. We're hoping to target 12 fellows. That's the plan, right? Up to 12. And, brief snapshot, we're looking at local leaders, right? These are individuals who are taking initiative to create a change in their community, whether it's an organizer or an entrepreneur, right? They're in their community and they're co-op curious. They're thinking, what are cooperatives really about? How do I do that? How do I facilitate this community ownership stuff, right? Maybe they're already used to sharing power and democratic management and conflict transformation, but they're thinking, how do I deeply embody this more deeply, right, into our work, right? So it could be elders or youth, really folks in their community trying to create a change, right? Local leaders. It could also be for community development, economic development practitioners, right? Whether you work with a municipality or a funder or some institution that supports housing or just community development, right? You're thinking, how do I learn more about cooperatives? I think affordable housing is interesting, but how do cooperatives fit into that, right? So maybe you're a community economic development practitioner, or perhaps you're a homegrown developer, what we call someone who's already relied on in their community for support, for navigational support, for translation support, for interacting with institutions, right? You're someone people call to get a scoop and generally to have a hand in helping them navigate some issue, right? Maybe you know something about cooperatives, you're helping people incorporate, right? You're a lawyer or an accountant, or you're just someone who understands the game a little bit how do you strengthen your journey and take the next step to becoming someone who could be a cooperative developer or someone more formally entrenched in the ecosystem. And then finally, folks who are co-op developers already, maybe they're younger in their careers, or maybe they're mid-level and they're thinking, okay, how do I balance out my expertise with some cultural competency? Or you're a service provider, again, someone who provides legal services, financial services or accounting services, marketing services, and you're thinking, how do I become a stronger player in my neighborhood to support co-op life, right? To help people to create community-owned enterprises or cooperative enterprises. So those are the types of fellows that we're looking for, that we're thinking of. Again, whether you're a local leader, you're a practitioner in the community economic development space, you're a homegrown developer or an existing co-op developer, those are the types of folks we're looking for. Folks who are professionals, but you're interested in how cooperatives and community ownership models can be more deeply integrated into your work. And then we'll have a professional development stipend of up to $2,500 per fellow. And that'll include support for your events, if you have an event or something you're trying to do in your community, as well as professional development, right? If you want to learn or go to a conference or take a course, we'll have some funds for you.
Hey, Johan, I'm a interrupt. There you go.
Dale.
A couple of CFNE staff have funky Wi-Fi, so we were assuming maybe we couldn't see your screen independently, but you may not be on correct sharing mode. So maybe just try again. If other people can see the screen, feel free to chime in the chat.
Got it. So right now it says you're screen sharing. Is there anyone who? No, I'm not.
Yeah, mine visually says that you're screen sharing, but there's no visual for this.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. I'm going to try again.
Sorry for the delay on trying to fix that.
yeah. Next time, get it there sooner.
Well, my Wi-Fi is weird.
No, you're good, Maggie. Thank you. How about now?
It says you started screen sharing, but
yeah, it's the same as before. I don't know why.
So, is there, Carolyn, could you screen share or anyone else?
I am bad at this, but I will give it a shot. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to try one more time, but yeah, I think the so-called fires in Canada or whatever the case is blocking out the Wi-Fi. Does anyone have orange skies, sepia skies?
Definitely doing something.
I've got sepia skies. Yeah. Thanks, Charles. Appreciate you. So I'm going to drop the link for you, Carolyn, if you don't have it, or do you have it?
I'm working on it. I'm just a bad visual DJ.
I know. No, you're not. But I know you think so.
Okay. There you go.
There it is. Cool. Thanks.
All right. So we're good? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So as I mentioned, 9 months, New York and New England, 12 fellows, ideally local leaders, community economic development practitioners, homegrown developers, or co-op developers who are looking for that cultural competency. Perhaps you're a service provider, right? A professional lawyer, accountant, financial services, marketing services, and you're thinking, I would really love to be a part of this movement. How do I get in there? So those are great. Anything to add to that, Carol?
No, I think that when Desi and Steph and Varun were talking, they were pointing at and are looking at the folks who introduced themselves in the chat. I think a lot of y'all are already here. They're talking about they've started projects. Who would they like to engage with? People in food spaces, in housing spaces, in art spaces, people who are advising business owners, people who are business owners and thinking about starting a cooperative. It's a pretty wide net of folks who you already have a professional context and you're thinking it would be better if I was more connected with the cooperative ecosystem. I could go even deeper in my work, whether that's business advising, creative placemaking, whatever it is.
Excellent. Yeah.
Oh, let me say one thing about the little how it works. We were having a little discussion before we came on about the time commitment, and in a minute we'll look at more deeply what is the work that's happening in between sessions, a sort of asynchronous learning in terms of these community projects, and I would just encourage people, don't be freaked out about the time commitment where it says 5 to 10 hours a week. This is sort of pointing to what Desi was saying about you're going to get out what you put in. And also, we're all in really different contexts. What you can put in might be really different. And it might be very aligned with the work that you're doing every day or not. So that's something to just, reflect on for yourself. But because there will be, a minimum amount of time that we're doing synchronously together in, one training session a month, every other month we'll have a peer support call to do some peer learning. And then the rest of it's kind of up to you in terms of, are there people either in your local area or in the sector that you're working in, whether that's food or arts or whatever, that you want to connect with more? And so you're just going to figure that out offline to connect with them. And then digging into the community and the context that you're in. And that's where a lot of that flex in spending time is going to come is, are you trying to do some outreach and community meetups? Are you trying to host some educational events? Maybe you're going to host an event and you're going to put a lot of time intensively in for a couple of weeks for that. And then other weeks, it's pretty minimal, just communicating and keeping your networks open. So I guess I'm just saying, don't be freaked out about the time commitment. It's an estimate. We're trying to be expansive or pessimistic or whatever with that. But it will probably be lumpy. It'll probably be around a couple of particular times in the course of the 9-month fellowship where you're okay, hosting this community event, all hands on deck, going to be real involved. And other times, you're in charge of your experience. It can flex to be what you need it to be.
Excellent. Let's keep going with the 2.0 community projects. Are we still good with the visual? Everyone can still see something? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so we got a couple of questions in the registration specifically about this aspect of what are the cooperative projects? And again, very self-directed, but if you're thinking in your professional context about what are those areas in my community that are, untapped, or maybe the asset used to exist and it's been, allowed to degrade a little bit and we want to really revitalize it, or there are a bunch of little informal networks but they're not talking to each other and we want to connect them, sort of like what Varun was doing in Connecticut. There were a bunch of people interested in cooperatives and they didn't know each other existed. And so how do we network them into something? Community projects could be a wide variety of things, and it's really starting with where your community and your context is at. So that might be pretty beginner. What are co-ops? What would it mean to go from a mutual aid association to something a little more formalized? How do we get people talking and just map who's here? What assets already exist? What all the projects will have in common is we're sort of rooting it in an asset-based community development approach, where we start with not the lack, not the absence, not the gaps, but what do we already have? What can we already do? What do we know? What do we have culturally and historically that we can build upon? And then, at some point, maybe we use that to leverage some outside investment, but let's start with what we have and what we know. And so each month we'll sort of have a project in between our in-person, or not in-person, our live sessions, where you'll have some homework. Go and, practice a skill of mapping. What are those institutions? What are those networks? What are those assets? What assets do we have as fellows that we want to share with each other, and sort of having a little informal needs and offers market amongst ourselves? Identifying the stakeholders in your community. Who are the people that need to be involved or are already doing this work? We're encouraging you don't have to apply with a partner, but we're encouraging you, if you know somebody that you already work with or you'd like to be working with more deeply, encourage them to apply too, because that will give you a little head start on having some local density to really supercharge those projects. And then as the year goes on, we'll start to actually work with you to plan some local community events. And that's part of that professional development stipend, is to be able to have some seed money to host a local convening where you are, whether that's for education or for even community planning about an initiative that's already emergent in your community. So, we'll be shooting to get together in person in April with all of the fellows, put finishing touches on plans for those local community convenings that y'all are hosting. And then, you'll sort of be doing those April, May, June, and in June we'll have a closeout event virtually where hopefully we'll get to share back what came out of those convenings. Looking at the chat, Isabel asked, are the fellowship discussions in other languages? We're going to probably have the main fellowship meetings in English. We can talk interpretation if that's helpful. And also certainly would encourage you in the self-organized meetups that you're doing to, yes, have them in Spanish or Portuguese or whatever local languages are helpful. And we have some interpretation support funds that we could help with that.
And the final piece we want to touch on today is the timeline, which has been covered a few different ways. Right now, we are opening up the application as of today, really as of earlier this month, but in July. And by next month, mid-next month, we will have selected fellows, ideally, working with some of our previous fellows and partners. And we will notify you by end of August. By September, we're hoping to have a meetup orientation in Boston at the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives conference. So that should be a fun time if you can make it. And then we will get the program running all October through June, right? With those monthly meetups, those virtual trainings, and those self-organized peer supports, right? There should be a few of you in each region. So you should have a nice, rich community to try to think through some projects or at least collaborate with each other around. And then we close out in April and then a June final closeout virtual. So with that said, are there any questions that folks might have that we have not been able to engage?
Yes, I just want to gather myself real quick. Sorry, guys, just multitasking. Some of the questions were for the fellows that were here, if if they are still around, because someone had mentioned something about, let me turn my camera on. There is no reason why it's not on. Sorry, shamelessly, I was multitasking. I didn't want you guys seeing me doing all this. So, hi, Johnny Charles, also known as JC. Joined the board for CFNE. So relatively new to just the board, but very familiar with CFNE as a whole. But there's a couple of things. One is I was wondering for some of the fellows that were speaking earlier, if they're still here, where is the movement of cooperatives and solidarity economy fragmented? Where are those fragmentations? If anyone can speak to that. And then just wanted to hear a little bit more from them about outside of that, where have they found success in terms of cross-sector collaboration? Because sometimes you can have a great restaurant with a cooperative model, but the vendor supplier on the other side may not understand the cooperative model. So therefore, there's this like dichotomy in terms of like how do we operate, how do we produce, um, with while holding this sense of ownership ideology. So like so the first one is where the fragmentation. The second one is cross-sector collaboration. What does that look like? And then if anyone's dealt with that, CFNE can speak to that as well too. But just wanted to hear a little bit more from those 2 points. Thanks, guys.
So yeah, thank you, Vern. Feel free to whatever you can with
Yeah, no, I think those are the questions we need to be asking ourselves. So, and I think in Connecticut, our network has been from the beginning cross sector. We in sort of large part, on a practical level, there just weren't enough co-ops of any sector to form a network. And so it just didn't make sense to be kind of creating sort of more division. When there are things that are unique to food co-ops, obviously, and to housing co-ops and worker co-ops and producer co-ops. But I think I think a lot of what we need, there's a lot of shared needs, and I think that's been the goal with the network is to sort of how do we figure out what do we have in common, where can we find and at the very least, like I think like some of it is just like being where can we like both on a like business level, like how can we create more integrated like supply chains, but also on a social level, like how can we be resources for each other as we're navigating conflict and harm. And I guess that brings me to the fragmentation question. Is I think that was a huge I mean, it wasn't like a surprise, but it definitely is a constant reminder that where there are humans, where we're trying to cooperate, there's going to be conflict and harm. And I think we saw that, we experienced that firsthand here in Connecticut with our network. We had a community accountability process that we was a part of trying to organize with a member, one of our members of our network, and it was really hard. And I don't know, without getting into the details, like I think it really, I think reinforced for me that we just don't have a lot of great tools, especially in responding to, I would just be real, like responding to intimate partner violence or sexual violence within that often, and in this specific instance. And I think that that leads to distrust if we're both obviously people, when people cause harm, but also when we don't as a community know how to talk about it and how to address it. And so I think that's been a huge part of our attempt. We spent like a lot of time like thinking through what is our model as a network of how we respond to conflict and harm. I don't think we've gotten it perfect, but I think that's sort of some of the work that I didn't go in thinking that we'd be doing, but became sort of increasingly is like in my work. Yeah, it's like how to I'm trying to interested in how do we train people up in conflict and harm, like how to navigate conflict and harm, how to and I think and I think often also like how to navigate power dynamics. I think there's a lot of like, just like people like, in theory, this like democratic governance sounds great, and I love it. People, there's I see a lot of local mutual aid networks, a lot of collectives that want to be horizontal, want to be, and in practice, it can be a nightmare. And we're not prepared. And so I think that we need, this is, my biased answer because I'm also, primarily I see my role in the movement as an educator, as a solidarity economy educator, co-op educator. So I think we need a lot of re-education around how to make decisions together, how to hold each other accountable, and how to give feedback, how to apologize. So I think that those interpersonal, a lot of the rupture happens at the interpersonal level. And that sort of creates organizational distrust, and I think the last thing I'll say, maybe just to long story long, is I think you're so right that a lot of folks are so focused and out of necessity on their own projects that we don't look up and see what else is going around. I had a very profound moment in Waterbury. Waterbury, has historically had one of the is one of the sort of hotbeds for co-op activity in Connecticut. They've had at one point the largest worker cooperative in the country. There was a conversion, a group of workers that organized to take over their factory, a brass mill. Didn't survive that long, but it was sort of and as a result of that co-op organizing in Waterbury, there's now the largest and most successful housing co-op in the state in Waterbury, that came out of that worker co-op organizing, and tenant organizing. And we had a local, one of the things we've been doing in Connecticut is trying to create local meetups for co-op members and co-op curious folks. And the housing co-op folks. So there was a Black women-led food co-op that's emerging in Waterbury. There's this housing co-op, and they had never met each other. They didn't know each other existed. And in some ways, the food co-op folks were like, oh, like didn't really know what a housing co-op was, or didn't really know, And then there's a nonprofit that's trying to incubate worker co-ops, and they didn't, they didn't. None of them were talking to each other, or really even were aware that each other existed. And I think that sometimes we get really deep in our sector, and I think that's good. We need to focus. And yeah, I think that's where the ecosystem approach is so important, is that we can, and so I think I think the cross sector is to me is one of the strategies that I'm excited about, and beyond just co-ops, like I think having a broader solidarity economy framework, thinking about how do we connect to mutual aid networks, land trusts. Yeah, I've just been so inspired by the land trust movement in Massachusetts and seeing what's happening with folks. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to get creative, and look outside of just our unique sector, our own specific sector, and the way that we practice cooperation is and consider all different ways of practicing cooperation.
Excellent. Thank you, Varun. Appreciate that question, Charles. I know you have another one, but I want to make space in case anyone, we're at 1:00, but in case anyone else has a final question, we can try to respond. If you need to leave, that's okay. You have our email. I'll actually share my screen again for everyone who needs it. And if you have a question that you can't ask today, you can't stay on, and so on, you can email us. Just reach out directly at johan@coopfund.coop, or maybe you're curious about Carolyn@coopfund.coop. And we have the application in the chat. You get the recording, this deck, and some of the resources, previous fellow interviews or executive summary, our program overview, and a playlist of all the webinars, and so on and so forth. So if you can stay on, you have one more question, we'll take it. Otherwise, that's the best way to reach out to us after this webinar.
And if you didn't register and want the deck, just drop your name in the chat.
Yes, please. Peace, Trey. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Jennifer. Francisco. Dina, free. Layla. All right, no problem, guys. So make sure you reach out, and we will talk to you guys soon.